Hey everybody, it's Chris, and tonight's review is going to close out the Trilogy Challenge discs for this year. We're going to look at Westside Discs Pine, the upcoming mid-range. Pine is going to be a slightly overstable mid-range. In my mind, it best fits when you look at dynamic discs. You have the Truth with the Verdict, and Westside, now you're going to have the Warship with the Pine. Very similar flights, very similar stabilities. I think the Pine might be just a touch more overstable, but very similar speeds, so you're going to get, again, very similar results. So if you like the way Westside discs feel in your hand, especially the Warship, this might be a great complement mid-range for you. If not, you're still going to be able to try it at the Trilogy Challenge, and you might fall in love with it anyway. So if you have any questions or comments, please put them below so I can get back to you. But I have a ton of footage, not just of myself, but also of Dan Mao and Jason Wilder and their opinions on this disc. So let's get to that so you can see how this disc flies. Hope you enjoy. Thanks. Alright, so out to the field with the Pine. A couple of test throws, maybe 80%, just to see what the disc would do. You can see a nice flat line, hard fade at the finish. For the second shot, I'm going to throw a little more flex on it, and it's going to start left. But you get to see it starts turning over, catches itself, corrects, and then has some fade. And these discs actually ended up almost on top of each other. I've been told by multiple people that the Pine and the Verdict were very similar, so it made sense to take those two out to test them. And you can see here, pretty similar lines. The Verdict might have stood up just a touch more, but these discs once again will end up within 15 feet of each other out there in the field. For the second shot, I wanted to put them on more of a hyzer line, and while the Verdict gets more height and ends up a little bit shorter, the distance left both discs travel is almost the same. Pretty impressive, really, with the different lines they hit. Very similar discs. Here's hole 3 at Lakewood Hills. This shot is pretty simple. Throw it out to the right, let it fade, which is exactly what the Pine wants to do. Gave me a good ace run just behind the basket. And the second shot is a second shot in hole 7. You see I have to stay under the canopy. My goal here was to skip into the circle, but it got caught up just before. I had really solid results with the Pine. Again, very similar to the Verdict, which is a disc I rely on pretty heavily. So here's Jason Wilder throwing it, just a couple test throws to get used to it. One he threw center line, ended up over left. One he threw over to the right to loop it back to center. And then we start his comparisons. Jason currently bags a Bard, so this is the comparison he really wanted. And what I could say from seeing him throw several times the discs side by side is that the Pine gave him a little bit straighter of a line and a little more distance than the Bard, maybe 20 to 30 feet every time. So here's Jason throwing the Pine and Verdict together. They're going to hold very similar lines. Once again, he's going to throw them with just a touch of hyzer out to the right. They're both going to fade back to center. The biggest difference consistently was that he was getting just a touch more distance out of the Pine, maybe 10 to 15 feet. And he was almost hitting Dan, which was added bonus. Jason's comfort level with the Pine just kept going up and up. By the end, I think 3 of his last 4 shots almost hit Dan in the feet, including this one.
First one is the Westside Disc Pine. I'm a primarily Westside Bard thrower, and this for me felt very similar to the Bard. I like the deeper rim. My fingers being a little bit bigger fit under that rim really well, and it fits nicely in my hand and flew very similar to my Bard. I don't know if it was intended to be a replacement or if it's supposed to be a complement, but I could see myself throwing this or the Bard and having similar success for my arm speed.
As you watch Dan turn this Pine over into just the slightest of headwinds, and it can be fun to note that both Jason as a Bard thrower and myself as a Verdict thrower were able to easily adjust to the Pine and start to get strong, predictable results out of it, just as Dan did. Here you can see him dialing it in on that easy fade. When it came to Pine versus Bard, similar to what Jason was seeing, Dan was getting a little bit of a straighter line, a little bit longer hold out of the Pine before the stability kicked in, and it was getting him just, again, 15 to 20 feet more distance on most throws. For the final comparison, here's Dan throwing the Verdict and Pine. Dan is a Verdict thrower, so it wasn't too surprising he was getting just a touch more distance. But when I say a touch, these discs tended to be within 10 feet of each other, distance-wise, from where Dan was throwing.
The Pine was an overstable. I really enjoyed it. It was quite similar to the Verdict. It's a lot deeper rim feel than the Verdict. It feels more like a warship in the hand, which is just, it feels a touch too deep for me. But I mean, it flew quite similar to my Verdicts, and I mean, it's a great stable disc.
So there you have it, 3 quick looks at the Westside Discs Pine and overstable midrange that will be made available for the 2017 Trilogy Challenge. I hope this review was helpful or informative for you. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to give it a thumbs up, share it, or even subscribe to the channel. Thanks once again for watching. Bye.